You know, doing a video on only the best melee weapons may have been too obvious of a video. In the gun ranking, I only covered the top 6, but this time I went through all 33 objects you can smack a zombie in the head with in this game, and then ranked them worst to best so that you can know exactly what's worth using. If you enjoy rigorous testing followed by flawless opinions, this is part 3 of the ranking series. Links to part 1 and 2 are in the description. We're closing in on 100,000 subscribers, so if you want to be here when we hit it and get notified when I rank the weapon mods in a couple of weeks, subscribe now. Right, let's start with the worst things you can hit someone in the head with in this game. You are the worst object to hit someone in the head with in this game. Yeah, at number 33, it's your bare hands. Genuinely the worst DPS in the game at like 2 under ideal circumstances, because the fist doesn't actually benefit from pretty much any damage or stamina perk at all, making it genuinely that worthless. Not even the fist perks help this out. Number 32 isn't much better, to be honest. The flashlight does have much better DPS, but all the same problems as the fist. And at number 31, we have a weapon that you actually just spawn with, making the last two kinda pointless. This one has a base DPS of 14, and it is the torch, but it can't be improved in any way, and it has no power attack, which really hinders its ability to stop zombies. On the plus side, it does have a 30% chance to inflict a small amount of burn damage. Number 30 is of course the stone axe. Now the stone axe can at least be boosted damage wise with Miner 69er and the strength mastery perk, which gives mining tools 50% more damage. But other than that, it's just not worth using at 25 DPS with absolutely no combat utility whatsoever or a power attack. The stone shovel isn't much better at 29 with 36 DPS. If you max your Miner 69er and get Battle Miner, it can work because it at least does have a power attack. Which reminds me, all the DPS stats in this video are with regards to the optimal conditions for a level 6 version of a weapon if it exists, so max damage perks, any other related perks or books, while power attacking. I ran the math and basically you do always want to be power attacking for the best damage per second, especially on higher run speeds where you need to slow the enemy down, and higher damage attacks are better at doing that. So at 28, we have the iron pickaxe, and you'll notice that pickaxes continuously underperform on this list with how weirdly low damage they are while having high stamina drain. With no other combat utility and 42 DPS, it's really not worth using. I should note, by the way, that damage per second is important, but it's not the biggest thing we're going to be worrying about for this list. A lack of utility or a poor stamina is going to get weapons knocked down really far down the list, so it shouldn't be surprising if there are relatively low DPS weapons actually further up the list. At 27, 26, and 25, we have the impact driver, the ratchet, and the wrench in that order. All three have the exact same damage and damage per second, but the wrench uses the least stamina, so it slightly edges them out, but they have absolutely no combat utility at all. Probably the biggest L on this list, number 24, goes to the pipe baton. Yes, an actual weapon is this low in the list. It's just a much worse wooden club with a tolerable 54 DPS, but with genuinely not a single drop of combat utility, because all the baton's special effects only really apply to the stun baton, so this is just a bad weapon. A surprise entrant at the Royal Rumble here at number 23, we have the Auger. It's pretty bad. At 60 DPS, that's not great already, but with no combat utility and no power attack, it's just not viable. However, it does avoid using stamina, but if you want to do that for some reason, there's no reason to not just use the chainsaw, which is an objectively better alternative to the Auger, having all the same downsides but higher DPS. At 22 and 21, we have the iron shovel and the axe, 63 and 79 DPS. They're fine, but as per usual in this section of the video, they just have no useful combat utility. Okay, most of the obviously terrible options are out of the way, and we're left with 20 weapons that probably are worth using at various points throughout your playthrough. Kind of. Unfortunately, the number 20 slot does actually go to the bone knife. I know, it is pretty good, but under ideal conditions, there are just more practical options. However, in its defense, if for any reason you are going to be using a melee weapon but not actually investing in melee perks, the bone knife does shine here because it is the best damage per stamina point of the basic primitive weapons when not using any perks, and the bleed really helps with that. Now, onto the main thing for the bone knife. It has an ideal base DPS of 19, which is very low. However, if you fully invest into the Deep Cuts perk, you'll also get extra bleed with that. The bleed equates to essentially an extra 7 damage per second, which makes it far more competitive, and the DPS from the bleed is not affected by game difficulty, making it far more useful the higher the difficulty you play. The full bleed requires 2 power attacks, which will do 140 bleed damage total over 20 seconds, so bone knives do have their place, and they are good, especially since they have a slow effect and bonus sneak damage, but frankly there is just a lot of other stuff you could use that just works more directly as a conventional weapon. These are a bit of a gimmick, but they are a fun and good gimmick. And hey, at least it's not a pipe baton, right? Now number 19, just barely I think, goes to the knuckle wraps. Kind of the same story here. Good damage and stamina ratio, but bad range, but a lot more utility on the knuckles. It has 50 DPS under ideal circumstances, not including beer, which can boost it significantly of course, but I didn't put it here because you're not always going to have beer even in the late game. However, it does have the ability to disable infections, get silver from punching zombies, a bonus knockdown chance, bonus damage to knockdown enemies, plus the book gives health on hit, which is a lot less important in the era of siphon strikes, but free health is free health. Probably genuinely in practice though, the most annoying weapon to start out with out of all the actual weapons because it's just so low damage per hit, but hey, that's the nature of the list. Number 18 is the wooden club. Solid, dependable, about 55 DPS, excellent knockdown bonus damage, excellent decapitation bonuses from Strength Mastery, ragdoll effects from the book that trivialize 1v1s, and practically infinite stamina with the book series completed. You cannot go wrong with the wooden club. It is ever dependable and will save you in a variety of different situations. But number 17, the stone spear, is just a touch ahead I would say. If you max the book, the perk, and Perception Mastery, you can get much better effective DPS of about 71, and you'll also get utility in the form of a slow, light bleed damage, armor penetration, bonus range, target penetration, even more bonus DPS from hit streaks, more damage to downed opponents, and practically infinite stamina thanks to its book as well. The only trouble is it lives in Perception, which is a bit meh. But taking a departure from the starter weapons that are kind of middle of the pack, we need to have a section dedicated to a bunch of endgame tools that happen to have extremely high DPS compared to these weapons, which is honestly not fair. It's like a middle-aged accountant boxing a 12-year-old boxing prodigy. Like, yeah, the accountant is going to win, but I'm not impressed by it. Alright, you losers, don't be so happy with yourselves, you smug bastards. You're competing with rocks tied to sticks. It's 16, 15, 14, and 13. In that order, we have the chainsaw, steel pick, shovel, and axe, with 90, 106, 115, and 132 DPS respectively, all offering absolutely zero combat utility. They have undeniably good DPS, and if you were able to get them randomly at the start of the game, they would certainly be better options than a bone knife you picked up off the floor, but that's never going to happen. But for the sake of the consistency of this list, I have to put them here. But I really can't understate the value of the bonus effects like knockdowns or bleed or stamina on kill. Alright, let's move on to the really good stuff. Alright, at number 12 we have a bit of deja vu here, the hunting knife. It only has 87 DPS, but you get a great slow, good bleed, and sneak damage. Knives could really do with a proper skill book in this game, I think. They'd probably be best if they did. At number 11 we have my goat. The Stone Sledge. Yep, it's a primitive tier prodigy, having 70 DPS, but all the amazing effects of sledgehammers, which include huge knockdown potential, which is vital on high speeds or on melee-based horde knights, the ability to slow down other zombies on kill, even more bonus DPS from its low health damage bonus, double XP on headshots, 50% more armor ignoring, and the ability to knock down zombies unconscious for a short time, plus essentially near infinite stamina once you max out the skill book, and a ridiculously high chance of decapitation thanks to its extremely high damage per shot and the Strength Mastery perk. Absolutely disgusting. Coming in just barely ahead was the Iron Knuckles at 10. Iron Knucks have all the same bonuses I mentioned for wraps, but have a much more respectable 78 DPS, which can be boosted again to insane levels with beer, and they are very stamina efficient. You can't go wrong with them. 9 brings us to the baseball bat, a relatively unimpressive 83 DPS, which is low for its tier, even being outstripped by the hunting knife, but all that juicy club utility brings it up to scratch. The ability to just bully zombies and infinitely attack are two things I kind of have a bias towards, as you'll see in this list, and of course this is my list. Make your own list if you disagree. I'm just trying to make it more widely applicable by running all the numbers. And 8 is of course the iron spear. Everything I said about the stone spear, but with a nice 109 DPS. That's right, jabbing someone with an iron spear is more devastating than hitting them with a chainsaw. At 7 we find ourselves already seeing our old friend the sledgehammer again, this time the iron sledgehammer. It actually only has a DPS of 88, despite its huge stamina drain and having all the same utility as the stone sledgehammer. It's honestly not uncommon to see sledgehammer users stick with the stone sledge until the steel one, because the stamina cost just isn't worth the horrible swing speed. But mathematically, when you're all maxed out, it does account to be a better weapon than the stone sledge. Just practically in gameplay, you probably just want to hold on to like a magnitude boosted stone sledge until you can make a steel sledge. Now this brings us to the top 6, which as I said at the beginning is actually quite predictable. Which is probably a good thing, because it means the melee weapons are actually quite balanced in this game, and you really can't go too wrong as long as you're actually using something that is actually classified as a weapon and not a flashlight, a chainsaw, or a steel pickaxe. Number 6 is the stun baton. Hitting way above its weight as a second tier melee weapon with 100 DPS, which is second only to the iron spear at that tier, but with its utility pushing it over the edge, and it's also helped by not having a direct upgrade to overshadow it either. The stun baton quite simply turns zombies off. It ragdolls them around, zaps them, stuns them, and even occasionally just insta-kills them. Where this weapon is held back is in its damage per hit, and therefore correspondingly low decapitation chance, and having very little book benefits applied to it compared to other melee weapons. Later on, it really does become a bit of an electrified pool noodle, great for crowd control, but you do need a second weapon to come in and actually do the damage, either that or a turret or a player to do it for you, and it's also held back by its big gimmick being significantly weaker against charged zombies who recover faster from electrical shocks, but who don't recover faster from something like sledgehammer or club knockdowns. At number 5, we have the machete. With 125 DPS plus its bleed DPS, it takes a significant bump in usefulness as a third tier melee weapon. Again, the slow and the sneak damage boost are good, but as ever, the sneak is only so useful in a game where you can't get sneak attacks on Horde Knight, and stealth on higher level POIs is just really annoying. Besides, a bow is probably better for that playstyle because both are silent, but one allows you to do attacks from range, which makes it less likely to wake up the zombie. On the plus side, to make up for its low damage per shot, the machete does get a very big decapitation boost in the code, which makes decapitations against weaker zombies much easier, making it a very satisfying and good fodder killer. At tier 4 we have the steel knuckles. What can I say? Everything I said about the last two knuckles, but it now has a DPS of 130, again before beer. Beer really does become necessary here though, to help with the low damage per shot, not triggering decaps on high health enemies like radiated zombies. If you don't know, you could basically not decapitate a zombie if you don't do a significant percentage of the zombie's health in damage, so there is always a bias towards high damage per shot weapons, even when the DPS is similar. At 3 we have the club. 135 DPS and you can 1v1 any zombie in the game with it. It's just a weaker sledgehammer to be honest, but if you're bad at stamina management, or you just prefer a little bit lower risk and lower reward, or just want something more nimble, you can't go wrong with a club. I don't even really have anything to say about it here at number 3. It's just good. And at 2 we have the Steel Spear, 178 DPS, the highest melee DPS aside from Steel Knuckles with Beer, and a very respectable damage per hit, allowing those decaps to keep popping later into the game, especially as you get magnitude boosted weapons, which of course leaves number 1 as the Steel Sledgehammer. It's a high risk, but it is so high reward. The 82 damage per shot base gives it a decap potential against damn near any zombie when you're maxed out on Strength Mastery. And the knockdown gives you incredible crowd control. It's harder to use, sure, but it can be used on so many more zombies at once compared to the machete, the spear, the club, or the knuckles, and it doesn't have the same electrified pool noodle problem that the stun baton does. It's just built different. By different, I mean probably incorrectly. But hey, when the weapon mod ranking comes out, it'll be on screen right now. So subscribe for that, and I'll see you there.